In 1959, Malika De Fernandez, an artist with a flair for spontaneity and an air of mystery, vanished without a trace from her home in England. Her marriage to Peter Reyn-Bardt, a former airline employee, had been brief and turbulent, marred by secrets and emotional distance. The couple had separated shortly after their wedding in 1954, and Malika had taken to traveling and living abroad. For decades, her disappearance remained an unsolved enigma. There was no body, no crime scene, no final words, just an enduring silence that left her friends and family in limbo. Yet behind that silence lurked something far darker, a secret that Reyn-Bardt himself would eventually bring to light. In 1983, nearly 24 years after Malika's disappearance, workers cutting peat in the woods near Lindo Moss, Cheshire, made a chilling discovery. Deep within the peat bog, they unearthed human remains, specifically a human head, astonishingly well preserved due to the natural properties of the acidic anaerobic peat. The gruesome find prompted immediate interest from law enforcement, archaeologists, and the media. Given the bog's proximity to Reyn-Bardt's cottage and the long-standing mystery surrounding his wife, police questioned him. But what happened next shocked everyone. Peter Reyn-Bardt confessed in detail to the murder of Malika De Fernandez. According to Reyn-Bardt's confession, he had killed Malika during a heated argument after she threatened to expose aspects of his private life, particularly his homosexuality, which, during the 1950s, was both taboo and criminalized in the UK. He said he had struck her in a rage, dismembered her body, and buried the remains in the bog behind his property. His confession was explicit and remorseful. He described burning some body parts, hiding others under peat, and trying to forget what he'd done. To the police, it seemed they had finally solved a decades-old cold case with a disturbing but neat resolution. However, the case took an unexpected and historic turn when scientists conducted carbon-14 dating on the bog remains. The results stunned everyone. The body, soon nicknamed the Lindo Man, was not from the 20th century. It was over 1,600 years old. The man in the bog had likely been the victim of a ritual sacrifice during the Iron Age, possibly as part of a Celtic religious ceremony. The condition of the remains, the violent injuries and preservation, had been mistaken for signs of a modern crime. Malika De Fernandez, it turned out, was not buried in that bog. She had never been found at all. But despite this, Reyn-Bardt's confession could not be undone. The court ruled that his detailed voluntary admission, even in the absence of a body, constituted sufficient evidence for a murder conviction. His defense tried to argue that the confession had been coerced or was the product of pressure due to the remains being found. But the forensic evidence, although misinterpreted, did not affect the core issue. Reyn-Bardt admitted to killing his wife and disposing of her. In 1984, Peter Reyn-Bardt was convicted and sentenced to life in prison for the murder of Malika De Fernandez, whose body remains lost to this day. The case remains one of the most bizarre intersections of ancient history, modern science, and criminal justice. It triggered major advancements in the study of bog bodies and their preservation, while also highlighting the psychological burden carried by long-held guilt. In a strange twist of fate, that's an abrupt one. It was the presence of a man from the Iron Age, preserved in near-perfect condition in the depths of the earth, that unearthed the truth about a woman who had vanished in the middle of the 20th century. Reyn-Bardt died in prison in 2007, never revealing the exact location of Malika's remains. And so, her disappearance remains half-solved, a confession without a body, a conviction built on truth and coincidence, and a final resting place that may forever be lost beneath the peat and time. The conviction of Peter Reyn-Bardt ignited a wave of legal and ethical debates across Britain. Could a man be imprisoned solely on the basis of his confession, especially when the only physical evidence turned out to be from an entirely different millennium? Legal experts were divided. Some argued that a confession, voluntarily made and rich in detail, was among the most powerful pieces of evidence in any criminal case. Others warned about the danger of convicting someone without corroborative proof, especially when that confession was prompted by the mistaken belief that the remains had finally been found. But the jury had found Reyn-Bardt credible, consistent, and uncoerced. The verdict stood. Meanwhile, scientists studying the Lindo man realized they had stumbled upon something rare and culturally priceless. The bog body was so well preserved that even the contents of his stomach were intact, revealing his last meal: unleavened bread and charred cereal grains. Wounds on the body told a tale of ritualized violence: a blow to the head, a garrote around the neck, and a possible slit throat. He had likely been sacrificed in a ceremonial execution, his body placed reverently in the bog as an offering to the gods. That a 20th century murder investigation had led to such a significant archaeological discovery only added to the strangeness of the case. Back in court, Reyn-Bardt's defense attempted to retract the confession, citing the enormous stress he was under when interrogated about the bog remains. His lawyers claimed that the discovery had mentally destabilized him, prompting him to confess to a crime he might not have committed. But prosecutors countered with evidence that Reyn-Bardt had admitted to the killing before he even knew the full results of the carbon dating. The judge agreed. The confession was not made under duress or manipulation. Rather, it was the result of guilt that had festered for over 2 decades. And while Malika's body remained missing, the story Reyn-Bardt told had the ring of tragic, chilling truth. Journalists and true crime enthusiasts latched on to the tale, dubbing it the Bog Body Confession. The idea that a 2,000-year-old corpse could inadvertently solve, or at least trigger a resolution to, a modern murder captivated public imagination. Documentaries were made, books were written, and Lindo Moss became a site of both historical and criminal pilgrimage. Forensic experts around the world reference the case in textbooks, pointing to the strange convergence of disciplines: archaeology, pathology, criminal justice, and psychology. All played a role in the outcome. Reyn-Bardt lived quietly in prison, reportedly never appealing his sentence after the initial attempt. He spoke little of Malika in later years, and never expressed a desire to identify where her remains might be found. Some believed he had blocked out the memory, while others speculated that he simply didn't remember. There were rumors, unsupported by evidence, that her body might have been incinerated or transported far from the bog entirely. Without a confession on that detail, and with no new physical clues, the final piece of the puzzle may forever remain unsolved. Malika De Fernandez, for her part, remains largely a mystery. Her life before her disappearance was marked by restlessness and a yearning for something beyond the ordinary. She had traveled extensively, lived in boarding houses, and mingled with artistic circles in London and abroad. Friends described her as eccentric, but not troubled, adventurous, but not reckless. Why she went to visit Reyn-Bardt that day in 1959, and what she might have said to him to trigger such violence, has never been fully explained. Her absence looms large in the story, the ghost at the center of a murder mystery without a grave. The bog itself became a symbol of memory, concealment, and eventual revelation. For centuries, it had kept its ancient secrets sealed in darkness and water. The bog had hidden Iron Age bodies, the remains of rituals long past, and for a brief moment, it was believed to have yielded the solution to a modern crime. Instead, it gave up something entirely unexpected, changing both the course of one man's life and the understanding of prehistoric Britain. Peat bogs became key points of research thereafter, and new protocols were developed to separate ancient remains from contemporary ones. Reyn-Bardt's case also prompted changes in how law enforcement interpreted confessions. Psychological evaluations were made more common, especially in situations where the confessor showed signs of vulnerability or confusion. The police and courts were forced to re-examine how much weight a confession should carry when unaccompanied by physical evidence. Though his guilt was never strongly doubted, the case set precedents in forensic psychology and criminal law that would echo into future decades. Universities across Europe still discuss the case in criminology and legal ethics courses. In the years following his conviction, the site of Lindo Moss saw a surge in archaeological interest. More bog bodies were recovered, including Lindo woman and other partial remains, further emphasizing the site's historical significance. Meanwhile, Malika's family, though never truly healed by the verdict, found some semblance of closure. The man responsible for her death had confessed. He had been punished. Still, without a body, a part of the tragedy remained unresolved. A plaque or grave marker could never be placed. No final rites were held. She became a name on paper, a woman defined by her absence. As time passed, the media gradually moved on from the bog body murder. But scholars and investigators continue to reflect on its broader implications. Could guilt alone constitute justice? How do you separate scientific discovery from criminal investigation? Can a confession, no matter how emotional, be trusted when made in the shadow of presumed evidence? These questions remain central to both legal and psychological inquiry. The intertwining of the ancient and the modern in this case provided fertile ground for exploration across disciplines, from anthropology and forensics to ethics and theology. In 2007, Peter Reyn-Bardt died behind bars at the age of 77. He had spent more than 2 decades in prison, aging quietly, mostly forgotten by the public. His death marked the quiet end of a loud and confounding chapter in British legal history. He left behind no memoir, no final statement, no admission beyond his original confession. Whatever lingering truth remained about Malika's final moments or the whereabouts of her remains died with him. The case was closed on paper, but open in spirit. Another mystery folded into the earth, waiting for time or nature to unveil it once again. Today, the story of Malika and Reyn-Bardt continues to appear in books and university lectures, both as a cautionary tale and a historical oddity. The bog remains that sparked the confession now reside in the British Museum, carefully preserved and respectfully displayed. Visitors often read the description in awe, unaware that the ancient man once triggered the confession of a modern killer. He has become a silent witness, not only to his own death, but to another. Thousands of years later, the coincidence was so improbable that it bordered on fiction. Yet every word of it was real. For some, the story is about justice long delayed, but eventually served. For others, it's about the inadequacy of confession alone. Still others see it as a story of fate, how ancient history can collide with modern tragedy to illuminate long-buried truths. The bog, that ancient sponge of time and secrecy, became a kind of character in its own right, harboring stories, exposing them when the moment was right. And though Malika's remains remain lost, the truth of her end, as told by the man who knew it best, has endured beyond his life and hers. In the end, the tale of Peter Reyn-Bardt and Malika De Fernandez is one that straddles centuries and disciplines, illustrating the strange entanglement of guilt, science, and justice. It reminds us that even the most well-buried secrets can one day rise to the surface, whether through the persistence of the human conscience or the patient decay of time. What the bog preserved for millennia, it revealed not just to archaeologists, but to detectives, historians, and a world eager to understand how the past and present can so eerily collide. And as long as her body remains hidden, Malika's story remains a haunting example of how justice may be served, even without the final piece of the puzzle.